So let's go ahead and launch GameSalad. And we're going to start with a blank project, so click on blank project. And we won't worry about naming things right now, but what we want to do is switch over to a iPad landscape because that's what all of our graphics have been formatted to. And let's go up to the scene button here and just come down to the initial scene. That way we can get into our workspace. So the very first thing that we're going to do is we need to start bringing in some artwork that we can work with. So we'll go over to the Images tab here in our library. Go down to the small plus sign, click on that, and then navigate to your art folder. And let's go ahead and bring in the rock, the ship, the chute, and the space background. We'll open that up. And you can just click and drag all of these images here up into the actors, and they all become actors automatically. So first, let's drag and drop our space background here into our stage, and we'll just get that aligned. When you have an actor selected like this, you can actually use the arrow keys to kind of just nudge it a few pixels in one direction or the other, just to get it kind of perfectly aligned. We can drag our ship here into our stage and a rock, and we don't need to drag this shot in quite yet because we're going to be spawning that later. Just to see how things look, we'll be spawning the rock as well, but just to kind of give us a quick preview that we can take a look at. And things are looking nice here for the game. So the first actor that we're going to give some intelligence to is our ship. Now, in earlier videos, you've already learned how to create on-screen controls. So after you're done with all of these tutorials for this space shooter, maybe you want to go back and actually add some on-screen controls. But just so we can make things move a little bit faster and you can learn all the different attributes and behaviors that you need to work with, we're just going to use keyboard inputs. That way we don't have to actually take the extra step of using the on-screen controls. But again, if you want to do that and actually publish this as an iPad game, you're going to need to have some sort of control system here. So just jump back to those earlier videos to learn a little bit more about that. So at this stage, what we want to do is we want to make our ship capable of rotating. That's very simple. We've learned that before. We'll just double click on our ship actor. And we want to start dragging in some rules and behaviors here. So let's create our first rule. So we'll click on Create Rule here at the top. And what we want to do is have a keyboard input affect a behavior. So in this case, we're going to move this down to key. And then we're going to choose the right arrow. And then when we push the right arrow key, what do we want to happen? So let's jump back over to our behaviors. And we're going to scroll down to rotate. So when we push the right arrow key, we want our actor to rotate clockwise. And if I just hold the Alt key and click and drag here at the top of this rule, you can see we've now duplicated the rule and the behavior. So we can quickly switch this up. So I'll click on the keyboard input again, and now I'll switch this over to the left arrow key by simply clicking on it. And then we'll switch this over to counterclockwise. So super fast, in about, I think, 10 seconds or less, we've now set up an actor that can rotate left or right, which is pretty powerful. Now, if you want to, of course, switch the speed, we can take the speed and turn it up to something like 200. And if we preview this and I press left or right, you can see now our actor rotates much faster. But I'm just going to keep this set to 90 right now for both of them. And now that we have our ship rotating, what we need to do is set up its ability to fire something. So obviously we have this shot actor. So if we jump back into our ship, we're going to use the spawn behavior, so spawn actor, to actually spawn that shot. But we're going to need to create another rule again so that we can apply a keyboard shortcut or a keyboard press to activate this spawn actor attribute. So we'll just scroll down to where it says key again. Again, we'll click on our keyboard here, and then you can choose any key you want, but I'm going to go ahead and press the space bar, or click the space bar here on our keyboard, I should say, so that we can use that to activate the spawn actor. So when we press the space bar, we get a spawn actor. And which actor are we spawning right now? Well, right now we have it set to rock. So if we were to preview this and I were to push the space bar, boom, we get a rock showing up on top of our ship, which of course isn't what we want. So let's switch this actor to shot. And again, I'll preview this, and if I press the space bar, you should see that little tiny dot show up here in the center of our ship. So that's great, but this is a bullet or an energy photon of some sort that we want to be moving in a very specific direction. So clearly we don't want it just showing up in the middle of the ship here. So we need to jump into the bullet or the shot. So I'll double click on that actor. We need to give it a bit of intelligence, and in this case it's going to be move. So I'll just drag the move behavior. We don't need to set up any rules because we just want every time this little shot shows up in our scene or our stage, we just want it to be moving in a certain direction. So we don't want it moving to the right, which we can see the dial is set to facing to the right, which is 0 degrees. We're going to click on this dial and drag it up, which gives us 90 degrees if you just want to type that in. So now if we preview everything and we press the space bar, you can see right away you get that shot coming out from our ship. The only problem is if you look very closely here, you can see when I press the space bar that the shot is pretty much coming out of the middle of the cockpit. We want to offset that a little bit, and that's really simple to do. What we want to do is jump back into our ship actor, so we'll double click on the ship actor, and go back down to the spawn, and you can see that you have this position that says 0 and 0, and we have an arrow pointing to the right and an arrow pointing up. So this is kind of our X across the screen, or Y if you know coordinates. What we want to do is we want to adjust the Y, so this up arrow. So this position is where it's going to be spawning relative to the actor. So right now 0, 0 means it's showing up at the exact center of the actor. So again, if I preview this and press spacebar, you can see it's showing up or spawning here at the center. But we want to spawn it here at the tip a little bit more. So it looks like it's shooting out from the front of the ship. So for this second coordinate here where we see the up arrow, let's just type something in like 30. And at first you're not going to know what coordinates to type in, but if you type in 30, you can experiment a little bit. And if I press spacebar again, you can see that's much better. We have this shot coming out of the tip of our ship. So I'm going to back up a little bit, and actually let's do 40, see how that looks. And 40 looks a lot better. It's definitely coming out of the tip of the ship now. Just a little pointer is when you're working with these attributes here, you can actually type in a negative value. So I can type in something like negative 40. And of course, you'll notice it's now all the way back here. So we'll just go back to 40 to set that up perfectly. So now, in no time at all, we've been able to create an actor where our ship can rotate with the left and right keys. And if I tap the space bar, we can now start firing this shot into outer space. Now this shot's a bit slow, so I'm just going to jump back to our shot actor, double click on that, and instead of 300, let's just double its speed to 600. And that's a little bit better. And at any point in your game, you can of course adjust this and get it to be the exact speed that you want it to be. So now that we have a fully functional ship that can actually shoot, let's get these bullets to interact with this rock, because right now if we preview this and we just shoot at this space rock, our bullets kind of just go right through it and nothing exciting is happening. So what we want to do is double click on the rock actor and start giving it some program intelligence. And we're going to create a new rule. And this rule is going to say that when this rock overlaps and collides with the actor shot, we want something to happen. Well, we want the rock to get destroyed, so we'll simply go down to the destroyed attribute and drag that into this new rule that we created. So one more time, when the rock overlaps and collides with the actor shot, destroy the rock. So let me go ahead and preview this. And if I take a shot at the rock, boom, it's just destroyed. So we can go back into our scene here, and if I click on the rock and hold the Alt or Option key, I can duplicate this a few times. So I'm just holding down Alt or Option, and we can preview this, and we can start shooting rocks in our space game. So now we actually have a fully functional game. Of course, it's not very interesting and exciting, and there's really no point because we don't have a score or a game over of any kind, but you've really jumped into creating your very first game here inside GameSalad fairly quickly. And I'm trying to keep things nice and slow, but honestly, this has taken us probably less than a minute of setting up attributes and rules to get to this stage, which is what's so exciting about using GameSalad. So these rocks are being destroyed, but they're not very interesting. We want something more interesting to happen when this rock is destroyed. And for that, we're going to need a bit of an explosion. So we can go back to our images, click on the plus icon, and we're going to go to the explosions folder and click and drag over all of these images in the explosion folder. This is an image sequence, and we'll click open, and that'll import here into our image library. Now, something to take note of, GameSalad often has this bug where it imports this image sequence incorrectly, or what I mean by that is in the wrong order. So if we take a look, you can see that the first image here is 0, 4, then we go to 0, 2, 1, 3, 8, 5, 7. It's just completely mixed up. And when you have a small image sequence like this, it's not that big of a deal, but it is kind of a bug that you want to pay attention to. So let's just reorder things by dragging the images into their appropriate order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So we have that all in order. So let's again double click on our rock. And we've already set up this rule here where when the rock overlaps or collides with the shot actor that we have here, it's destroyed. But we also want it to do something else. We want it to spawn an actor. So let's go back to our behaviors, and let's drag spawn actor into this rule that we created here. Doesn't matter if it's on top or bottom of destroy, but we'll drag that in there. So again, when the rock is overlaps or collides with the shot, what actor do you want to have it spawn? Well, if we back up here, we don't have an actor here in our inspector that we want to spawn. We want to spawn the explosion. So we have to go down to our images, drag one of these images up in here, and now we have an explosion, or at least the beginning of an explosion, and it's called 0, 1. So if you want to rename this explosion, you can. That way it's easy to understand what we're selecting. So double click on the rock actor again, and we want to spawn the explosion. So watch what happens now if I preview this. If I shoot one of these rocks, it destroys the rock, but the rock not only destroys itself, but it also spawns this image, which is the explosion. So the explosion's static right now, so what we want to do is we want to double click on explosion, and we want to add an animate behavior. So we'll go into behaviors, and then down to animate, and just drag that into the explosion. And we can go back to our image library, click on 0, 1, hold the shift key, and then click on the last image, which is 11 here in our explosion animation. We can drag all of that up into this animation panel. And right now we're set at 10 frames per second. So the fact that we have about 11 frames means that this whole animation will start and end in about a second. And it's going to loop, and we're going to restore the actor's image when done. Now, what does it mean to restore the actor's image when done? Well, if you take a look at whatever image you have here, or if I double click, whatever image you have here, this is what's going to be restored to when this animation finishes. So I'm going to leave these two on for right now so you can see what I mean. I'll click preview. Let's start shooting some rocks. So we have this explosion, and it's completely looping. So that's what loop does. Now that really doesn't make sense unless we're stuck in a time warp in our game here. So of course we don't want it to loop, even though that looks cool. So we'll uncheck loop, and we'll keep restore actor image when done on, and let's preview this. So we don't get the loop, but then we get back to this static original image. We don't want that either. So now we'll uncheck restore image, actor image when done. And we'll just shoot one of these rocks and we get an explosion that does not loop and does not restore the actor's image. And we have it reacting exactly the way we want. Now I'm not sure why space rocks would explode like that, but again, it still looks cool, and this is a video game, so we can pretty much do anything that we want. The one thing that I am going to adjust here is this explosion is kind of huge. It's like twice the size of the rock itself, which is fine, but let's make this a little bit smaller, and we can make the explosion smaller by adjusting the actor's image. So if I back up and I'm actually inside the actor like I am now, the explosion, you'll notice over here on the left where it says attributes, there's a size option. And our original image is 512 by 512 pixels. So we can adjust this and maybe do something like 128 by 128. And let's preview this and see if that's a little bit more appropriate for our rocks. And that definitely is smaller, but it's a little too small. So let's just jump over here and I'm just going to type in 200 by 200. We'll preview that one more time. And that looks much more appropriate in size. Perfect. So now we have our ship that's moving, we can shoot, and we have rocks exploding, which is definitely bringing us on our way to having a much cooler looking video game.